Yeah, we are kind of rivaling Polyphonic Spree for the size of our cast. But we've been fortunate in Stirling in that we have a group of learners who are very thoughtful, very reflective, and who are prepared to help us shape what we deliver in Stirling. Now, with the Syrian resettlement programme, it's kind of forced upon councils to really think about what we're doing and what we're teaching and how we're going to go about delivering it, particularly the areas out with kind of the main resettlement areas in the Central Belt. We've really had to think quite hard about how to use the funding we have and how to adapt very quickly to the new reality of refugee resettlement. Now, Mazen is a great example of one of our learners. He's helped us shape what we do. His feedback has been absolutely crucial, and I'm pleased that he's able to come here today and speak to you about his experience, about what's worked and what hasn't worked, and what his goals are for the future.
Good morning. أنا مازن حبيب.
My name is Mazen Habib.
أنا قدمت إلى UK في 27 من أبريل هذا العام.
I came to the UK on the 27th of April this year.
وعندما وصلت إلى إدنبرا كان في استقبالي جوناثان ومجموعة من البلدية.
When I arrived in Edinburgh, Jonathan was at the welcoming end and other officials from the Scottish Government.
بدأت الدراسة في اللغة الإنجليزية بعد أسبوع من وصولي إلى هنا.
I started learning English 1 week after arrival.
بدأنا في أول 3 أسابيع ببرنامج مخصص للمبتدئين في اللغة الإنجليزية.
In the first 3 weeks, we started in a beginner's program to learn English.
ومن بعدها جاءت العطلة الصيفية فذهبنا إلى المدرسة الصيفية لمدة 4 أسابيع.
After that, the summer holidays came, and then we went to the summer school
4 أسابيع.
for 4 weeks.
كانت مدرسة جيدة لأننا تعلمنا اللغة الإنجليزية وزرنا كثير من المناطق كالمتاحف والحدائق والأماكن الترفيهية.
It was a good school because we learned a lot as far as English was concerned, and we visited other museums and other parts of Scotland and other buildings.
ومن ثم بدأنا الدراسة في هذه السنة بإيصول.
This year we started the ESOL program.
ومن أسبوعين قمنا بدورة تدريبية في الفوركليفت.
2 weeks ago we started a training course in forklifting.
أوكي. نسعى بموضوع الدراسة من أجل الحصول على وظيفة، من أجل الاندماج في المجتمع، من أجل الاندماج في المجتمع.
The purpose of learning English is to integrate better in the society and to get a job in the future.
ومن أجل مساعدة أطفالنا في المدرسة.
And also to assist our children at school.
ومن أجل معرفة الحياة بشكل عام موجودة هنا.
And to learn better the way of life in this country.
ومن المهم لنا أن بالمستقبل عندما نتعلم اللغة الإنجليزية من أهدافنا أولا الحصول على العمل، وثانيا أنه نحاول أو نسعى بتطور الأمان في اللغة الإنجليزية.
One of the aims of learning English is later on to find a job. In addition to that, to further my studies in my field.
وخطتنا الآن تبدأ بالحصول على وظيفة في الفوركليفت بعد أن انتهينا الدورة، والاستمرار في دراسة الإيصول باللغة الإنجليزية.
And the present plan is to continue learning in the forklifting industry, getting a job and continuing with our ESOL program.
وسوف نستمر في دراسة اللغة الإنجليزية لنحصل على مستوى جيد للدخول في الجامعة أو الكوليج.
We will continue studying English until we reach an advanced level that will allow us to join the university to continue my studies in my discipline.
ونسعى بأن الحصول على أو دخول إلى الجامعة باستمرار دراسة في مجال المحاسبة.
And I would like to continue my studies in accountancy as being an accountant before.
وبشكل عام الاستقبال كان جيد وممتاز.
In general, the welcoming was wonderful. It was excellent.
وكان التعامل كتير جيد ولم نشعر بالغربة.
people treated us very well, and we did not feel that we were foreigners or strangers in a country.
ونسعى لإنشاء كثير من الصداقات من من الناس المحليين أجل تحسين لغتنا فهذا بشكل مهم نتواصل مع الناس بشكل مهم.
We also are very interested in making lots of friendship and social contacts with the local people to improve our English language and to integrate better in the society.
وهذا يعني هذا الملخص بشكل عام وصولنا إلى هنا لحتى الآن.
This is a summary of from the day we arrived until today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, a couple of months ago, we did an evaluation of the programme in Stirling. Now, in Stirling, our kind of support is very much focused around kind of ESOL and employability. That's kind of where we kind of put the resources. That's where we put a lot of our focus. But what it does mean, there is a trade-off there. What it does mean is there's less support for those mundane daily tasks of kind of getting out to the pharmacy, getting out to the doctor, that kind of thing. The focus really is on the long-term big picture. And of course, there is a risk in that. And the evaluation helped to confirm what we had suspected, but we had no evidence to prove. And it's what are people's fears when they arrive in Scotland? What worries them? What motivates them? My suspicion was that actually when people first set foot in Scotland, their worry is their family, finding work, speaking the language. It's not, will I end up in Wick if I try and go to the pharmacy? It's not, will I, will I be able to get my kid to school on time? It's that bigger picture, and that's kind of really where the kind of the focus needs to be. But when we were evaluating, we talked about obviously the fears. We talked also about families who shared with us the sense of boredom they faced when they first arrived, and that's going to create a lot of challenge for us, because how do you, without intruding in people's lives, how do you help people to kind of fill their time? How do you ensure that they feel challenged and stimulated in their lives? What can we do without being too intrusive to support with that? And of course, it's all tied into language and developing language and giving people those opportunities to go out and share. Now, Scotland's not an easy place for that. I'd say we're stingy with our language. We don't share, we don't communicate. We are fortunate in Stirling that we've got a very strong, there has been a very strong community response led by Stirling Citizens for Sanctuary, who provide befrienders, who go out and really help a lot with this. And this is about, they're able to go into people's houses and support the learning of English and support the integration process through through befrienders. There's also something which we've never quite come to terms with, is this impatience to progress, impatience to get out to work, to move forward. And of course, learning a language takes time, but then it also makes you think about actually how much language do you really need in order to function, in order to get out, in order to live a fulfilling life. And that's what we've had to think about with our ESOL delivery. All of our learners are of a kind of beginner level. So it's not like when I've worked in the past when most learners I've been working with have been of a kind of an intermediate kind of level. We're starting at a much lower level. We don't have the time to wait 4 or 5 years for people to get the level of English up before progressing into forms of work. So we really had to think about how much language do you really need, and how do you prepare the community as much as you prepare the learners? How do you prepare the community to welcome, accept and work along with the learners?
Okay, thanks. Well, the first thing I want to emphasise is we don't have all the answers. It has been a bit of a learning journey for us as well. Basically, we were asked just to kind of highlight some of the difficulties and the problems that I think we've all faced as local authorities trying to kind of cope with the needs of the VPR programme. Certainly, shared services. We have worked informally between local authorities, but also informally. And I just want to flag up that when we first heard the Syrians were coming, I did actually speak with one of my colleagues in Falkirk Council, who's sitting here today. And actually, because she'd lived in the country, she was able to give me the background, she'd worked with Arabic speakers, she was able to give me ways of working. So I think that's something that should also be captured, is that there's a lot of working in between local authorities. And actually, it's mainly at events like this that we have actually met and then had that conversation and chat. We did have formal shared services. We had a shared education service with Clackmannanshire. So I was responsible for setting up the ESOL coordination and the literacy classes, ESOL literacies, for both Stirling and Clackmannanshire. That was quite good because it did give us a wider range of families and levels to work with. There was a wider range of locations. And because of this, we had to adapt our delivery model. As more families came, we had to try different things. Initially, we taught the Stirling and Clackmannanshire learners together because the numbers didn't justify separate classes. Then, when we got more individuals, we started delivering things just in Clackmannanshire, just for those Syrian refugees, especially in local venues. It was in libraries, their local offices, the places very much within their communities. Eventually, we had enough to start trying level. So there was enough individuals there that we could have a beginner's class and a post-beginner's class. What then happened was that we, then when we were decoupled from Clackmannanshire, right, education services then split up, that we still continued and we were very much commissioned to do the ESOL literacies, and so to help their learners gain an accreditation in ESOL literacies. So that was quite useful. Now, certainly working within the local authority, there were a couple of sort of cons. I mean, we were invited to the task groups very late on. I think sometimes 3 weeks before people were due to arrive. You know, everybody agreed that ESOL was critical, but discussion was basically on everything else. It was on how we're going to arrive, how we're going to pick them up from the airport, you know, where they're going to stay. So I have to say, although everybody agreed that ESOL was crucial, I did feel it was an afterthought for most of the sort of task groups initially, at least. But certainly, in terms of the pros, I mean, very much there, it was utilising the skills of a wider team. I mean, we don't have a history of refugees and asylum seekers in Stirling. So we've learned a lot about their particular needs and the difficulties that they've been facing. So we're now in the process of moving on to a blended ESOL and employability sort of programme. And that's where individuals like Jonathan, who have got a lot more experience of this through his work in Glasgow, and also the wider employability service within Stirling Council have been really helpful in kind of creating this blended approach. So the next, thanks for Jonathan there. So, working with the third sector organisations. Well, firstly, it has been really important to us that we have engaged with the sort of voluntary groups. Part of this, there's a number of reasons, but one is we just didn't have the capacity to do this by ourselves. We only had 3 generic ESOL classes running and everything else was in the workplace. So suddenly to get people who are, it is expected will be getting 12 hours a week of tailored provision, we just didn't have the capacity. We also needed a quick response. There was no time to recruit new staff. I mean, we had like 3 weeks' notice. All this was happening. Already, we've got history in Stirling of working with the voluntary organisations and working in partnership with them to like coordinate provision. So that's been really useful. We already had that good working relationships with them. And I think most importantly, it was the right thing to do. You know, it's important that we involve the communities that the refugees are then going to be working in. And I think you mentioned there's a lot of individuals who are wanting to volunteer. And I think it's important to kind of capture that. There is very much goodwill out there and to kind of manage and use that support. We're looking at the Stirling School of English. They're a voluntary organisation which delivers English language teaching at all levels. They are part of the Stirling ESOL stakeholders group. So already we meet regularly to discuss provision. They get a share of the Scottish Government ESOL money. So it was obvious that we would then work with them. So initially we did 2 mornings a week and they did 2 mornings a week. And that way we were managing to meet the hours for the individuals. Coordinating actually wasn't that more difficult because we would still have regular meetings with the tutors to make sure that everybody was basically working on a similar theme, a similar topic. The learners really enjoyed that because it was mixed classes, and because it was mixed levels, it wasn't just all Syrians in the one class, given the fact that you've got real beginners, beginners, post-beginners, so that certainly helped. There was a summer school as well, which I think Mazen's mentioned. And again, I think that whole cultural component, the activities, the trips, certainly, and very much a family approach. They had families there involved as well, so that was really quite positive, and people really enjoyed it. It also meant, though, that our tutors could get a break as well. But I just want to say, we weren't just taking advantage of the Stirling School of English. The local authority did make a financial contribution for them. Fees to obviously help the additional costs that the organisation had to meet. The next thing is the Stirling Citizens for Sanctuary. I don't know if the MDs maybe hear from them today. Yes, I have the man there waving a hand. Better watch what I say then. But actually, it's a very interesting organisation. They're part of the wider Citizens for Sanctuary movement. And it was set up very much in response to the Syrian refugees coming across. So very much there was a will there. They've been doing befriending. So when people are arriving, they're going to the house, they're meeting them, they're helping them prepare meals, they're showing them out in the wider community. It's very much a more holistic approach. Certainly one of the things which I was interested in was the English and the community side of things, that the reinforcement of language that they're learning in the classroom. They could then be doing that out and about. There's no point in teaching shopping in a little vacuum. It's important to practice that in a real-life shopping environment, and that's something that the volunteers were doing. They've been doing walk and talk. Also, there's been some joint training, and certainly I delivered joint training on ESOL literacies and also communicating with non-native speakers, which was very successful. And actually, as a result of that, at the council, we gained extra volunteers as well. People were very interested in the work that we were doing. So we got additional volunteers through that. But certainly I'm sure if anybody wanted a bit more information about the organisation, I'm sure she would be available to talk later on. Okay. I suppose the next thing is about our teaching principles. Now, this will not come as a surprise to anybody here. We are based in community learning and development. And very much our approach is learner-centred, it's responding to individuals' needs. But also, I just want to emphasise, it's also being structured and aiming towards their goals. So it's important that we don't just give the learners what they're asking for, but also take that longer view as to what are the skills they need to learn for their next step in them achieving their goals. So, but I think that just to kind of underpin that, all the work we've done has been underpinned by the CLD approach. One of the things I wanted to flag up was the emergency English. And certainly when people were just arriving, I think Jonathan said, people are arriving, the first thing they want to do is to get a job. I think one individual I heard of, when he first arrived, the first thing he said was, "Shame on me, no work." So obviously people are wanting to get on in the workplace, but they also need emergency English to actually help them kind of integrate into the communities that they're in. So again, within 2 weeks of them arriving, in fact sometimes even within 1 week for some families, but obviously having to fit round trips to the Home Office, trips to the job centre, all-day doctor's appointments and all the kind of schools and all other things they've got to do, we were starting the classes 9 to 12 sessions, mainly with myself, and it was just covering what people need. And it's interesting that most of the stuff is actually number-based, because the numbers 1 to 30, well, you've got to dates, time, money, prices. A lot of the real practical stuff that we do is actually number-based, and it's giving them the language to express that, because all they had, families, the first couple of weeks was just day after day of appointments. So being able to work with them on days of the week, being able to work with them on times and the simple time was really useful. And again, it moved into the cultural phrases and the cultural differences. Now, this was their initial assessment. there was no point in just doing somebody steps off a plane, giving them a language test, because there's no way they're going to be able to function. People were in culture shock. But over those 3-4 weeks that we were working with them, you really got an opportunity to see what actually the English that they did have. You know, they'd gone past that silent period and were then actually able to engage with the language. And people who at first you thought had no English at all became quite apparent they did have. So that was why that was very much, that short kind of input was really, really valuable for many reasons. We then moved on to general English. Just general English for people. But then at what point does that general English have to kind of widen out into more targeted English? And certainly our programme has evolved. So we do have general ESOL. It is looking at, looks at grammar. It's looking at more general kind of ESOL topics. But then we've also got ESOL literacies as a separate thing to work on for those that require it. And more just general literacies for those who are not, don't require ESOL support, ESOL literacy support. Numeracy and budgeting, I do just want to kind of flag up on that. It's not just the language associated with working with numbers. It's actually a bit more than actually numeracy classes themselves. A lot of the individuals have left school at 12 or 14. And as a result, many of them require to brush up on their number skills as well as their language skills, especially if they are then going to be going into the workplace. So I just want to kind of highlight that as something which became quite apparent when we started doing some group activities, that actually number work was also needed. There's been personal development, there's been computing classes, the vocational language, which I think Mazen's already mentioned. I've been delivered 3 to 4 weeks worth of forklift truck language. So basically, it's pre-teaching the language for the forklift truck course and some of the principles of counterbalance. It's been amazing. I've learned so much. I really have. In fact, I'm quite upset that I didn't get to go and sit the test as well. But that was the thing. So, and although there was a translator for the course, not everybody would have required a translator having done the kind of work that we've done. But it means if they're going into a workplace, they now have the English language for that skill as well. Been quite useful.
We've always had this acute awareness that what we're delivering doesn't necessarily meet the needs of all the individuals, and we are probably the worst people to judge if it's meeting the needs of all the individuals. So we've had to really think about work flexibly and understand that there are likely to be gaps in what we're doing, and we need to respond quite quickly to those gaps. Something that was very apparent, I felt, from the refugee resettlement programme was that there's kind of this big wall of grey men that everybody faces from the moment they arrive in the airport to go into classes to everything's around this big wall of grey old men, including myself. So we've had to think about how do we really understand the needs of the women we're supporting? Do we really, what we are told in class, which is a mixed environment, does that really reflect what people are wanting out of class, or is language being adapted to suit the environment that they are in? So what we've done recently is we've set up the Inspiring Women course, which is delivered by somebody external, because again, the fact that we're from the council, and the council has all these connotations, people, quite rightly, would not necessarily want to share with me or with Duncan what they want to do in the future. So there needs to be this kind of, how do we put it, a safe environment for people to kind of talk about what they want to do, to understand what the options are, and to make a plan for that, which is then fed back to those of us who can help make it happen. And again, another thing which has come out in the Inspiring Women's course is the fact that people want to learn with their families, but they also want to share what they know and what's important to them. And this is where kind of the storytelling course has come about, which is delivered by somebody from Community Learning and Development, but it's about the women sharing stories which they have grown up with, but using Arabic, English, Greek. All these women in the class are able to use their own languages, are able to share, and they're able to produce something tangible, something physical, something which is their own. So again, it's an opportunity which came up, which we kind of jumped on, and it's another important part of what we're delivering. The life skills support is integrated throughout the whole of the course. we respond to when things come about. Forklift training being an example of that. When we initially sat down and thought, what are we going to deliver in terms of ESOL, at no point did we think we're going to have to develop a unit in forklift driving. But again, incidents happen. Incidents happen out in the community. Maybe somebody's had an unfortunate incident with a member of the community. We need to look at the language that we use. How do you respond to that? So again, it's having that flexibility, having the staff development time in order to respond to what's happening. And of course, another crucial thing is help with finding volunteering placements. And I'm delighted to say I've discovered that people have set up volunteering placements which I've known nothing about, which I think is a really positive outcome. When people start making their own placements and doing their own thing without feeling the need to share it with myself, that's great. That's what we're wanting. Hopeless when it comes to my evaluation, but that's great. The issues we faced are probably familiar to everybody involved in refugee settlement: childcare. In theory, we ensure that all children have access to nursery provision, council nursery provision. I've kind of held back from organising separate creche, partly because we're able to without having the huge numbers that other people have, but also because that whole interaction parents have with the nursery is so crucial, I think. And again, it's having the opportunity to use language, to understand the language that goes around education. That's absolutely critical. And nurseries have played a very important role in the resettlement programme. However, we still have people who aren't able to attend class because of children. We aren't always able to get nursery provision when we need it. It's a challenge. I'm not sure what the answer is, but we're working on it. Families are placed in separate communities. In Stirling, the families all live in different areas. We've been very careful, deliberately careful, not to house people too close together. It is partly to do with the shortage of housing in Stirling, but also because we want people to be able to make the community their own, so they can have their friends around and show them the community, so they've got their own space. This, of course, creates a challenge. People need to travel. We provide bus passes for the first year. It does also create problems with Duncan in terms of where to deliver language provision. Another thing which I've been very concerned about is this idea that we have got a two-tier system. Provision for Syrian refugees, provision for everyone else. So what we are providing is open to everybody. The driver has been the Syrian resettlement programme, but it is open to anybody who needs it, and it will continue to be that way. Really, what we are doing here is building something which we hope is sustainable, which will outlast the Syrian programme. Will be there next time there's a resettlement programme for somewhere else, or Stirling's a university town. We have people who enter the asylum process while living in Stirling. We need to meet their needs as well. So as much as we talk about this being the Syrian programme, it's not. It's open to everybody. And I think that's absolutely critical. Plus, language classes are much more effective when you've got a mixture of languages, mixture of people, mixture of backgrounds. And the other issue has been this balance between what we provide. Are we providing people with a language to function in their community? Providing people the language for employability? How do you meet the needs of people as their priorities change, as their needs change? You have, because of the numbers, we're only providing 1 or 2 classes, so how do we meet that? And I suppose, again, it's this flexibility, being prepared to adapt, not planning too far in advance, being able to change what we deliver as and when people need it. Very quickly, the additional ESOL funding has been critical in that it's allowed us more time for development. The tutors need the time to go out, get out there, find out what language people are needing. We need the time to learn from our learners and speak to them and find out what they're wanting and adapt what we are doing according to their needs. In the past, I think ESOL has been, the way the funding has worked, that has not allowed this space for people to actually go and speak to those who are meant to be benefiting from it. So it really has allowed us that opportunity. So we don't skimp on the development time for the tutors, I think. And also, it's important that it recognises the importance of ESOL and accredited learning to this whole programme. And as Duncan mentioned, there maybe was a sense at the beginning that ESOL had been sidelined because of this fear that something will go wrong, and there will be damage to the reputation of the council, that what we must do is mollycoddle our families and not give them the opportunity to learn, to express themselves. So The funding has allowed us to place ESOL at the centre and say, look, effectively what we are doing as a council is allowing people the opportunity to gain the skills, gain the language that they need in order to function independently without us. ESOL and employability need to run together. Now, it goes against everything I've argued throughout my career, this idea that you need to have ESOL, people should not have work foisted on them until much later, but actually the feedback is people want to be able to develop their own career path, their own journey. Therefore, we have a responsibility to think, okay, how much language do you need in order to work safely and without being exploited? And it's not enough to say, your English is too low, you can't do X, Y, or Z. Actually, we need to think around that. We cannot turn around to our learners and say, look, hold on for 4 years, then we'll get round to this. And that's a challenge. It is a huge challenge, and especially since we have to sit in front of employers and make this argument and say to them, look, this is what you need to do to adapt in order to meet the needs of these people. Independent study, supported study is critical. The community is absolutely crucial in all of this. People have got time. They've got time to learn. What our responsibility is to make sure they've got those tools, that they have the resources to use when they're at home, that they understand that learning can't just take place at home and at school, it also takes place at home, to make sure there's as many different opportunities and forums for people to share their language. And again, going back to the role of the community, using befrienders, ensuring that the community is supported. It's not just left to them to deal with it, but there's the two-way communication, and we're working together and we're sharing information and we understand the importance that the wider community play in all of this. In the future, we want to engage more local employers. It's a challenge. Employers are inundated with offers for workplace or requests for work placements. It is a challenge getting employers on board. There is also a challenge in that what people's long-term goals are often do require higher levels of English. So we have to support people to make a plan to show how what they're doing now will support them reach that goal. But actually, in the short term, if you want to work in a warehouse, if you want to do deliveries, that can fit within this longer term plan. We won't walk away from you the moment you get a job. We will still be there to support you. But that means having employers who are also committed to their staff and the staff learning. Most of our learners have expressed a desire to go on to college, particularly the younger members who've maybe had their education curtailed in Syria and who've always felt this frustration that they've never quite managed to achieve what they wanted to achieve from their learning. So we'll tie into Forth Valley College and ensure that they're able to access the training. And again, an important part is ensuring they've got the language in order to access that. This is not about just the Syrian programme. This is about building a service which is going to outlast Syrian resettlement. Something which has surprised me in my year in Stirling has been actually the numbers of refugees, asylum seekers living in the community who we had no contact with and who were not getting the support and felt they couldn't go to the council seeking support. People have come to us as the result of this. It shows that there is a need there that is beyond the Syrian programme. So the Syrian programme has given us the drive. It's allowed us to connect with the community in a way we weren't before. It's allowed us to develop this programme, but actually this is something which needs to be ingrained within the council and what we deliver, and it needs to outlast the Syrian crisis. We need to update staff skills, ensure that the wider staff within the council and other services feel supported to provide support. And again, it's about harnessing that goodwill that's come out of the Syrian crisis. So any questions, I'm sure myself, Duncan, will be happy to answer. And anyone also will be on the Q&A panel later. Okay.
Thank you very much.